The Louisville men's basketball team came up short on the road against the North Carolina Tar Heels on Monday evening. We'll talk about that result and how the weekend fared for the women's basketball team on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned, we're going to dive into the Louisville men's basketball game against North Carolina Monday evening. The Cards, unfortunately, were defeated 70-63. We'll talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. We will then identify the key takeaways before we transition over into the women's basketball side of things, where the top 5 ranked Cardinals bounced back against the Virginia Tech Hokies and won big 70-56. We'll start out talking about the men's basketball loss from, depending on when you're listening to this, yesterday evening, with this being recorded on Tuesday. Look, I want to talk the good, the bad, the ugly. The good being the fact that the team continues to show fight. The bad being kind of resorting back to some bad habits. And the ugly being the offense in the last 3 or so minutes of the game. Now, I get it. When it comes to a loss, there aren't that many positives that you can truly take away from it. I mean, when it all comes down to it, I'm not, like I keep saying it, I'm not a big fan of moral victories. I don't claim moral victories. I do, however, think that there is a fine line between finding some positives in a performance and claiming a moral victory. I think it's critical, in every outcome that you at least, take one positive away from it, even if it may be the smallest detail out there. And, in a close loss down in Chapel Hill against the North Carolina Tar Heels, a team that, the first matchup didn't necessarily end in good graces with the officiating and stuff like that. It makes this game, it makes the fan base want to win this game that much more. And I get it. There's not a lot of positive to be taken away from this game. Ultimately, if you were to crown anything, the good portion of this segment, it is the fact that you're continuing to see a balanced effort and you're seeing players, continue to, play their hardest. Jae'Lyn Withers, Malik Williams, Dre Davis, all with 10 points apiece. Even though Sam Williamson only had 7 points, played 60 minutes, I thought we got some good minutes from him. Noah Locke played pretty solid, 4 for 8 from the field, 9 points. Ellis didn't necessarily shoot the ball all that well, 3 for 10 from the field. He had 7 points on the evening, and so on and so forth. So overall, look, I mean, with the way this season has gone, it's hard to find a lot of positives from any of it. Ever since the team went 4-0 in conference play, they've won 2 out of their last, 12 contests in conference. So it's tough. I think that I guess one positive that I see is, despite, the team being, 12-15 now, that they're still competing their hardest and they're still, putting effort out there when they could just mail it in. They could get blown out every night, but instead they go into one of the toughest places to play in college basketball, regardless of how good you think North Carolina is, coming in there and making this a game, fighting until the end. Unfortunately, that leads us into the bad segment. That is kind of resorting to bad habits is what I like to call it for the men's basketball team. Now, when I talk about bad habits, that might be, maybe I'm not wording that correctly. I think that the concerns that we've had all season long, were popped up in this game. When you look at, from a statistical standpoint, the Cards were 25% from 3. Overall, there were 13 turnovers. And ultimately, North Carolina really didn't take advantage that much. I mean, they only shot 28% from three, had the same amount of turnovers. So overall, statistically, down the line, almost identical nearly. North Carolina had 2 more rebounds. Excuse me. They did, however, shoot 8 more free throws and 2 more assists for the Tar Heels. So ultimately, it's one of those things that this really kind of resorts to the eye test. When we talk about the concerns that we've been seeing all season long, it's the perimeter shooting. It is the overall, decision making in terms of shot selection. And we kind of saw that regress a little bit against North Carolina, in the sense of I felt like, when Louisville did get good looks, guys were able to hit shots, but especially we'll talk about the offense in the last, 3 minutes or so here in just a second. But I feel like the shot selection just felt rushed. It seemed like there was some poor decisions in terms of making certain, or shooting certain shots, I should say, and especially kind of going into the ugly portion. But before we do that, just a final recap of the bad section. It's kind of the same stuff over and over defensively as well. I think that leaving guys open on the 3-point line, especially a team like North Carolina who has guys that really can make you pay from deep, although they didn't necessarily do it all that much, shooting less than 30% from 3-point line. You saw that at the very end of the second half where that kind of came to life. And that kind of leads me into the ugly section of this. That's the offense in the last, 3 or so, 4, maybe, under the last TV timeout, under 4 timeout. When you look at what Louisville did, I'm going to go with a play-by-play, from that section of the game. So after the under 4 timeout, Louisville ends up, basically, it's, if you look at 2:58 left, Malik Williams hits a 3-point jumper. It's 64-63. The next however many shots, Jae'Lyn Withers missed 3-point jumper. Jared West missed 3-point jumper. L. Ellis missed 3-point jumper. Malik Williams missed a layup. And Noah Locke missed 3-point jumper. So overall, when the Cardinals cut the lead to 1, that's where I felt like we saw this team get back into the we saw this team get back into the kind of the same stylistic sense of playing. When we talked about this team early in the season, it was they're really kind of grinding out victories against it was Maryland and NC State, but ultimately it feels like in this slump, so to speak, it's kind of been the opposite. When Louisville has, gotten within striking distance, you talk about Duke, earlier, was it earlier in the month? No, it was at the very end of January. There were other games, North Carolina. The offense kind of stalled out. There was some poor shot selection at the end of, a handful of these games. And I think that kind of represents the ugly section of it is, Louisville has shown that they can get right back in it. But the issue is, getting over the hump and, continuing to run good offense. And unfortunately tonight, there were some struggles and, shots weren't falling in the last, 3 minutes or so. But I really think that when you go back and you watch the shot selection and you watch, how rushed it looked, you just kind of came away with the sense of, man, Louisville may have, wasted some good opportunities to run some plays and get some good shots off. I felt like it just seemed a little bit rushed, but proud of the effort. I'm glad that these guys are continuing to compete. Losing a ton of games has to be demoralizing. Card Nation's still behind them all the way. I don't care if they were 28-0 or 0-28. I'm going to continue to cover this team, and we will break down every single performance. I want to kind of transition this into talking about the overall takeaway from this, and I think that's this kind of ties it all together. Good effort, but some of the lingering concerns from throughout the season kind of put the Tar Heels ahead of the Cardinals in this one. We'll talk about some of those takeaways in depth after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all of your sporting needs, and it remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Transitioning over into the initial takeaways, like I mentioned just before the ad break, talked about a good effort, but at the end of the day, some lingering concerns. Some of the same issues arose and prevented the Cardinals from winning this contest. I think it's never easy to come I guess you could say come into this game with not a lot on the line. I mean, I guess you're playing for pride at this point, and at some point, it probably is talked about, whether a team that has, high expectations that it just doesn't necessarily work out. You wonder, are they just going to mail it in? Are they just going to get, demolished for the rest of the season? And it's relieving to see if we're taking a small positive away from the negatives. It's relieving to see that this team is continuing to fight, continuing to try to go out and win ball games. It's a pride thing now. Like I said, very proud of them for staying with it. And you can say, "Oh, Dalton, this is Louisville. You shouldn't be losing. You shouldn't be having a losing record. How can you be proud of a team that is underachieved?" I get it. You can be disappointed in the season that has, transpired. But when you take context into account, I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can still be. I think that there's a lot of factors that went into what has happened this season, and I'm sorry. I feel for the guys. Like I feel for the team. I'm just glad that they're continuing to compete, and I hope that they can end this season on a high note. From this game in general, like I mentioned, it was all about, the effort was there. This team was battling. When North Carolina showed signs of trying to get a lead, Louisville stayed right there with them until the very end, until 64-63, and then the Tar Heels scored the last 6 points of the game. So overall, I like the effort that I'm seeing. When you saw what Carolina did, I thought Louisville's defense from three-point land, they kind of got lucky on some point-blank misses from Carolina. Armando Bacot, 12 points, 15 rebounds. He was the player to watch for that I focused on yesterday's episode. He had a solid game once again against the Cardinals. Brady Manick, 17 points. R.J. Davis had 16. Caleb Love had 16. Shot a lot better than they did the first time around. They only got 2 points from their bench, so it's mainly been the starters in a game like this. Overall, I think that it really just kind of comes down to the issues that we've been seeing. We talk about the perimeter shooting aspect of things. We talk about the decision making. When I watch this Louisville team, it really just shows the signs of a team that is still trying to come to terms with what their identity is on the offensive side of the court. And I am going to be honest, I'm not necessarily sure what their identity is on the offensive side of the court. And it seems to be clear that this team is trying to be a solid three-point shooting team that kind of excels in shooting the ball behind the arc, but unfortunately the shots just aren't falling, even though guys on this roster shot the ball really well last year at their respective stops. But ultimately, I don't really know how to explain it. It looks like a team that's trying to fit a style that doesn't necessarily suit the way they're playing. It feels like this is a team that should be going more inside and kind of slashing. Instead, I think that Louisville is a little bit too, a little bit too. I don't really know the word you want to go with here. I guess you could say a little bit too. They elect to take perimeter shots too often, especially when the shots are falling. By all means, if you're hitting your shots, let it fly, shoot or shoot. But unfortunately, it seems like more often than not, it's like Louisville's trying to shoot themselves out of a slump. That it seems like there isn't much evidence from the season that they've done that so far throughout like the course of a game. So I think that the initial takeaways stem not only from a good effort, but some concerning issues. I think one of the reasons why they haven't necessarily been able to fix the concerning issues, especially in terms of shot selection, is I feel like, these guys are kind of scrambling out there and wondering, okay, what is our offensive identity? What is our style? And I think that that's kind of the question that hopefully we can try to get some, type of answers in the last 3 games of the year. Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Virginia, all 3 are going to be challenging games. You're going to have to, have good offensive nights if you want to come in and win these games. Ultimately, I'm just in the headspace of I'm going to continue to watch these guys, continue to cheer these guys on like any, true Louisville fan would. Commend them for their effort. Definitely appreciate them for not, selling the season, so to speak, and, putting forth their best effort. I think that in this game, what kind of held them back was just them, the perimeter shooting being obviously shooting 25%, but it's not necessarily almost the shooting percentage that kind of got me the most. Was just the shot selection that was utilized. So hopefully in the game against Wake Forest, we see the team try to work through the offense a little bit more, try to get in the lane, kick it out if you need to get some better looks, and hopefully that can see some more shots fall in and stuff like that. But we'll continue to preview. We'll continue to recap throughout the remainder of the season heading into the ACC tournament. I want to end the note on a very positive one. The women's basketball team bounced back from a loss against North Carolina with a 70-56 victory over the Virginia Tech Hokies on Sunday afternoon. Another ranked win for Jeff Walls' squad. We'll talk about everything that went down in that contest and how the Cards were able to come out on top in this one here in just a second after we talk about our friends at Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry when you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket? Rock Auto allows you to save time and money. So why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is also a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. So do yourself a favor. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. Coming off of a loss, there is perhaps no better coach in college basketball than Jeff Walls to get his team motivated for the next game. Rarely ever do you see the women's basketball team go into a multiple game skid. The Cardinals, all 3 losses this season, Arizona, NC State, now North Carolina, each one has been followed up with a win immediately afterwards. Not only that, but a winning streak. The women's basketball team topped the 23rd ranked Virginia Tech Hokies on senior day at the KFC Yum Center on Sunday afternoon, 70-56. It was another balanced attack. Haley Van Lith, 8 for 17 from the field, team high in 20 points. Emily Inksler, 19 and 15. That was her 8th double-double of the season. Kiana Smith, 11 points for her. Liz Dixon had 7. Olivia Cochran and Chelsea Hall with 4 respectively. So ultimately, Cards looked very, very solid, especially defensively. Three-point land didn't necessarily take that many, 25% from three, but only shot 12 attempts, 3 for 12. Out-rebounded Virginia Tech 43-31. That's something to focus on. Also forced 14 turnovers. They were in single digits in turnovers for Louisville with 9. So and another thing that I thought was very key was Virginia Tech on the road shot 11 more free throws than the Cardinals. So I'm never want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I felt like Louisville should have shot more than 15 free throws in this contest. But ultimately, it is what it is. It's a solid ranked win coming off of a loss. It looks like, they're pretty much all going to be, all but certain going to be the 2 seed in the ACC tournament. They conclude regular season play this week at Pittsburgh and then at Notre Dame on Sunday. We'll obviously talk about and recap both of those matchups whenever that time comes. But overall, I think that it was a good note to send the seniors out on. I said this to a friend in conversation on Monday, the day after the game, and he agreed. And my point was, Emily Ingsler's only been here for 1 season, but with the way the fan base has kind of gravitated towards her and really, welcomed her into, this community and, the love they have for Ingsler, almost feels like she's been here for 4 years. And I try not to be a victim of recency bias and try not to overdo things and jump the gun, so to speak. But I can't think of a player who's had more of an impact in the Louisville women's basketball program in 1 season. In 1 season of playing. I guess that kind of limits. That probably just limits. What possible players out there you could even fit into this category. I guess you could say transfers, players that have transferred into the program. There are not many, if any, that have left an impact and a lasting, I guess you could say lasting impact as well. Then Emily Ingsler has. Defensively, we've seen what she does for this squad. Offensively, she's kind of the Swiss Army knife. She can shoot it from deep. She's very, very solid on the inside as well. But I think perhaps the main thing that she has brought to this team is just the, take no crap swagger. The whole the New York toughness, mantra, so to speak, that mentality of, I'm tough. You're not going to bully me on this court. If anything, I'm going to get the last laugh. And just having that swagger and having that confidence, I feel like it's trickled down through, the team and through the program. And it seems like the fan base kind of, when Ingsler's out there on the court, it's like, it's a style of basketball that it's must-see TV. Emily Ingsler, even though she kind of reminds me of like a Draymond Green. She's rarely ever going to lead the team in scoring, but she's a solid passer. She is, an extremely good defender, the best in college basketball. I've been saying that for quite some time now. And then you mentioned, all the other things that she brings to the table in terms of on-ball defense, off-ball defense, rebounding, interior toughness. I mean, pick and rolls, etc. Emily Ingsler, just a huge impact for this team in her 1 year. Another, transfer has had a big impact. Kiana Smith, shout out to her, even, behind Dana, and in a balanced attack this year. She has definitely left her mark on this program. Chelsea Hall, 1 year with the program, I feel like has served as a calming presence, a veteran presence in big games, and has made some big time plays, especially in that Kentucky game back in December. Ultimately, shout out to them. We're gonna miss them, but a great win against Virginia Tech. It's another resume-boosting win. You can put a ranked win on the schedule. The Cards, I believe, are number 4, dropped a spot in the AP poll after losing to North Carolina. So not necessarily far behind, well within striking distance for a number 1 seed. We will continue to talk about the women's basketball previews and results here later on in the week. Before we get out of here, I want to give a couple quick shots first to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. You can check the most recent one out that came out on Monday night on on Twitter, on Facebook, etc. at cardinalsportszone.com. Once again, I want to thank you for making Locked on Louisville your first listen every day. Tomorrow's episode will feature some baseball talk. We'll also get into some possible, what we want to see out of Louisville spring practice for both the offense and the defense. Now, do yourself a favor. Make your second listen Locked on NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. But that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Go Cards, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.